Hey everybody, this is Ben Watkins, creator of the Amazon original show Hand of God, and you are watching Mr. Media.
I'm Bob Andelman, and this is Mr. Media Interview. You can see, hear, and read more than 1,000 of my previous celebrity interviews on MrMedia.com. That's MRmedia.com. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, iTunes, Apple News, Google Play, or Stitcher, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. On today's show, I'll talk to Ben Watkins, creator and showrunner of the Amazon Prime series Hand of God, starring Ron Perlman, Dana Delaney, Andre Royo, and Garrett Dillahunt. The show is returning for its second season. Before this, Watkins was perhaps best known as writer, story editor, and executive producer on USA's long-running Burn Notice, which we love. Stick around. The name of the show threw me. There's no denying it. Hand of God. Now, I'm not a particularly religious guy, and the new Amazon Studios series, starring Ron Perlman, Dana Delaney, Andre Royo, and Garrett Dillahunt, now in its second season, didn't sound like my kind of show. But then I was asked if I would like to interview the showrunner, Ben Watkins, who previously wrote and produced Burn Notice. I said, all right, let me check it out. We already have Amazon Prime, it didn't cost me anything. I started watching the first episode, and then the second. They just keep playing. What are you going to do? Now, before I knew it, I was halfway through the first season of 10. God damn it, I said to no one in particular. How many times will I make the mistake of judging a book by its cover, or a movie or a TV series by its name? Let me tell you, Hand of God is really, really good. In this age of peak TV and 400 new series all vying for our time and attention all at the same time, it's hard to know what to watch. My wife and I gave up on Amazon's Man in the High Tower, frankly, but we gave USA's Mr. Robot a second chance, and this past week we started dabbling in Mozart in the Jungle, which absolutely a wonderful show. And again, I'm not a classical music guy, so I kind of avoided it. But you know what? If you haven't seen that either, great stuff. You will not be disappointed, folks, if you sample Hand of God. I guarantee you'll start watching it and be like, whoa. And with that, Ben Watkins, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Good to have you. Thank you for entertaining me for 10 hours and keeping me from getting any work done. Damn you.
Yep. That's my pleasure. I love hearing stories like that.
It's true. It's funny. You just don't know. You get the name of a series and you can make a decision just based on that. And I made the wrong decision. I'm just glad I had a chance to correct it. I got to ask, though, was this always the name of the series, and was there much debate over whether to go with that as the name of the series?
No, actually, the original name of the series, in terms of when I was developing it, and I even have an old draft on my computer, and it was called The Zealot. And, it stayed that way for a long time. One of the last elements to be added to the story and the character was the sort of religious epiphany, or his associating his journey with some sort of spiritual breakthrough. And that was something that I added to the character. Ron Perlman plays this judge who goes off the rails when his son commits suicide, or attempts suicide, and he's in a coma. So Ron Perlman goes off the rails. I wanted that because I wanted to explore somebody who becomes a zealot, becomes focused on one particular thing, and everything they do in their life is related to that and focused on that. But as I wrote the story, I realized at the end of it, it would have been too easy to just write him off as just being crazy and only crazy. And yeah, I wanted that to be part of the dialogue, but I wanted there to be more to the question. Because when I looked back at the stories that sort of inspired me to take a modern day take on a zealot, stories like John Brown and Nat Turner, both of those guys thought that there was something else going on inside of them, that there was something spiritual or magical happening, and some of their fans and some of their supporters felt the same way. And so I had to have that element in my show. So I basically said, well, if this guy's going off the rails, let's also have him wonder if it's a religious thing. And that's when I had him have this spiritual experience. And when I did the rewrite with that in mind, this title just popped out. I mean, Hand of God just sort of applied in a lot of different ways. And one of them being a vigilante, sort of, if he's going to carry out God's will. and one of them being if he is actually, inspired instead of insane, then he could be touched by the hand of God. So made that title, and trust me, I have reps, my agents over at Creative Artist Agency. You can't go out on the town with a show with the word God in the title in any form. But I really felt like I had already written a script that was out of the box already, and I figured, look, why run from that? We're already going to be putting people in very uncomfortable places and making, bringing up conversations and topics that make people uncomfortable. And, the title's just part of it. So I kept the title. I held my ground on that, and, we ended up getting it made. And then I realized, I thought about it after we sold it. I said, I bet you Amazon's going to come to me and say, great, we're going to make it, but can you change the title? And to their credit, they said no, the hands off, they'll let it go.
That's amazing. And I think we should point out that Hand of God, for all it sounds like on the face of it, it's also the name of a I don't know if you call it an itinerant church in the
Right.
That plays a part. There's a very handsome young man and a strikingly beautiful his girlfriend. They're starting up a small church. It's a nice thing. We find out that he was once on a TV soap opera, which I believe Dana Delaney started on the soaps.
I think Dana's done a soap, and that was actually a late addition to that character. I always had him being on a television show. Originally, he was going to have been on an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger. But Dana Delaney had got wind of the fact that I used to be an actor and had been on a soap opera. And so it was her pitch. She said, why don't you make Paul a soap actor? And so we ended up doing that with him. Yeah.
Well, see, it's funny because I stopped. I actually did stop the show at one point when she said that he had been on a soap, because her character discovers that. And then I stopped and I thought, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure Dana Delaney had been on a soap. And I went and looked them both up because I thought, okay, there's a big difference in age here, but what if they cross paths on a soap? These two actors.
Oh wow, yeah.
That would have been something. Or if she had turned out to have been if her character had turned out to have been on a soap or something. So anyway, that stopped me. But we and this is where I want to make sure people don't run thinking that this is just about zealots or other religious terms. The thing is, when we meet this young couple that's running this church, we don't know why, but they have a check for $50,000 from a judge whose name the bank recognizes and will not cash the check. They want a check on it. And I tried to explain this to my wife, and I'm sure she just looked at me like, I've told her what happened, and she's like, oh, come on, that didn't really. So they're trying to convince the bank. Now, at this point, we don't know if it's a real check. We don't know if they have a real church. We just know they have $50,000 check. They're trying to get it cashed, and they'll do anything to get this thing cashed. And the girlfriend does something that I just went, okay, this is not a church. This is not the Waltons. I mean, this is not okay. It may be called Hand of God, but this couple, this is help me out here. This is not a show for people who really are that religious and are that devout and who are easily offended. This is not your show.
No, and you know what the truth is, Bob. It is a show that's designed to make you uncomfortable in terms of, or make you explore how you feel about certain things that you might have already sort of categorized as one way or another and very conveniently put in a box that really don't deserve to be in a box. Religion's just one of those, race is one of those, politics is one of those, family dynamics, your relationships. Those are all things that, to get through life day to day, we sort of put them in a box and say, oh, well, this is this way and this is that way. And a lot of times that's not true. There's more than one thing going on. So we have these two characters, and Paul and Alicia, and he sort of, comes across as a hustler. And yet he's this pastor who seems to be only in it for the glory and the money. And yet he gives some really prescient advice at times. And you wonder, when he's relating, scriptures from the Bible, is he a guy who believes and is just sort of, also trying to capitalize in monetary gain? Or is he a guy who's completely a hustler and doesn't even care whether or not he's telling you something that's true or helpful? Our show is designed to take any question like that and say the answer is both. We don't want to say it's either or. And so for a lot of people, that starts off in a very uncomfortable place because even some of the complex shows that are out there right now, there still is this sense that they have taken a stand one way or another. The answer is this or that as opposed to both. In this show, when you get in there, the ground moves under your feet a little bit. So you see in the scene you're talking about, you see this young couple come in saying they want to cash this check so they can do God's work. And they seem very sincere and all about the scripture and all about wanting to be, good Christians. But then when the bank manager says, I'm not going to cash the check, a decision gets made that makes you wonder, okay, how far would they go? And that's another thing that I love about our show is we ask the audience to sort of explore that question within themselves. If you really wanted something, how far would you go? And if you end up getting what you want, then is whatever you did justified? If you go to the extremes, in this case, she has sex with the bank manager.
You gave it away.
Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. I love. I mean, but for a lot of people, it's like, okay, she went too far. But for some people, it's like, if you really feel like you need that, and this is a major step forward for you, for whatever your goal is, then have you gone too far? It really is something that only the individual can answer.
So what I wonder is, so if the bank manager had been a middle-aged woman instead of a middle-aged man, would he have had sex with the manager instead of her? I was hoping that in the 10 episodes we would have seen the flip side of that, to know that he was just as committed. He wasn't just pimping out his girlfriend.
Yeah, that's a great question. That was one of the things that came up in the writers' room. We talked about that, and even into season 2, and a lot of the on the writing staff, there were a few women who said, "Hey, turnabout's fair play. Mm-hmm. Why don't we have a situation where if there's the same sort of move needs to be made, but it should be him, and it could be it could be that the bank manager was a middle-aged woman, and then Paul has to try to seduce her, or it could be that the bank manager is a gay man and Paul has to do.
He still has to seduce him.
Pushing him, yeah, exactly. How far is he willing to go? And right. if he's willing to push his girlfriend into those places, then he should be willing to do the same thing. So those are definitely the kind of questions that we love to answer. I mean, or to confront, and it's really difficult. A lot of times, you find out a lot about yourself, even in the writers' room. When you have to answer, what would you do and what would that character do?
Now, interestingly, folks, we're talking about two characters who are pretty much actors that you probably will not recognize their names, but they're very, very attractive people. We haven't even met Ron Perlman, the star of the movie, the star of the series at this point. But then we meet him, and how do we meet him? Well, he's having. Speaking of Breaking Bad, is an interracial scene. It's him as the judge. And we think his girlfriend initially. We soon find out she's paid for and been that way for a long time. And it's a very intimate scene between the two of them. And it turns out he's in his judge's quarters, his judge's chamber. So I'm saying this stuff now so that people who are easily offended, people who are very devout, don't make a wrong turn here. This is not for you, but interestingly, it is for everybody else.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you look at the comments that we've gotten, our audience response has been fantastic. But there are some people who see this as and again, this show has a lot more than just the religious aspect. But when it comes to the religious part, there are some people who watch the show, and as you said, when you judge a book by its cover or judge too quickly, there are some people who say, oh, this is hypocrisy, this is blasphemy. And then there are other people who say this is a really complex and interesting dialogue about religion, about the fact that you can be religious and still there can be contradictions even within a church or within your own beliefs, and it's okay to have that conversation. And so they actually like it. It just depends on where they're coming from and whether they're willing to entertain some of the more complicated questions about religion and spirituality.
Well, Garrett Dillahunt's character is very religious, strangely for a guy who has committed murder more than a few times, is very narrow-minded in the way he sees the world, and he turns out is the most religious of all the characters, whether it's be the preacher and his girlfriend, or Ron Perlman's character. It's just
Yeah.
this show has. I think what I really liked about it. There was a lot of things that I liked about it, but what I really liked is the layers. It's every character has and is treated to a really deep backstory, and there's twists. Ron Perlman's character, the crap that he goes through, the things that we learn, the things that he goes through in real time, and then the what we learn about him in flashback scenes. Oh my God, it's just okay. I'll use the word. I think it's a brilliant show. The more I think about it, and I mean, it's amazing. And tell me about Andre Royo's character, and tell me about and I can't think of her name. Perman's girlfriend.
Oh, Emiyati Cornialdi. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I couldn't rehearse that right.
She's got both of her names are tough to say. Yeah. Emiyati Cornialdi, who's sort of a breakout. I mean, really a breakout actress. She'd already done. My wife actually saw her in an independent film called Middle of Nowhere, and when this role came up, there was only one scene in the pilot, and it's not necessary, and for that role. And so I had to sit down with her, myself and Mark Forster, say, hey, there's really a journey for this character. And she's actually going to, in many ways, be the moral center for this show. So don't judge it just by the pilot where you see her in the judge's chambers having sex with a client. She brings a certain humanity and subtlety to everything she does. And she plays, Ron Perlman's character's call girl. But there's really a really strong bond between them. Again, bringing into this question of like, can there really be more than just a client and provider relationship going on there? Can you be that close with someone over a certain amount of time and not have some other form of connection to them? And so we decided to explore that, and we used her as sort of a source of, someone who's not manipulating this judge, because they have a very particular and specific relationship, which is all about the money and the service, right? So that's her only agenda, and it's different from most of us because that agenda is right out in the open. And so she becomes a safe harbor for him throughout as he's navigating this really, really crazy journey that he takes during season one. He's trying to figure out, am I going crazy, or am I having a religious epiphany? What am I going to do with my life? And he's dealing with grief. And she becomes a safe harbor and helps to sort of direct him in a lot of ways. And his best friend is the mayor of the city. Andre Royo does a brilliant job playing, Robert Boston, Bobo. And, this is a guy who's beholden to Ron Perlman. Like everything that he's gotten in this point, a lot of it is attributable to Ron Perlman's character. Ron Perlman plays the judge, Pernell Harris, but he comes from the family that really is, controls the city. So he's the kingmaker, and he's decided, to make his good friend Bobo the mayor. And when Judge Pernell Harris goes off the rails, it really jeopardizes everything for everyone, including our mayor, Robert Boston. So you see Andre Royo's character really struggling with, what does he really want, and what is his biggest alliance to? Is it to his lifelong friend, or is it to his career goals and his, hold in the city, which is being jeopardized by what Pernell Harris is going through right now?
Well, and I want to go back for just a second. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I want to go back to the young lady we were talking about, whose name I apologize to her right now. I'm not even going to try to butcher your name, but I loved her, and I would watch 10 hours of her as that character, or just 10 hours of her reading the dictionary. I mean,
right.
She's beautiful, and she's just so compelling. It's a great actress too. So
yeah, I think the camera loves her. But and that doesn't hurt anybody, right? I mean, it's more than just saying, oh, is she pretty? But she just has this sort of look that's something about her that really draws you in. And then she does the work. Yep. She's just a great actress, and you're seeing it now. She was in the conversation for Emmys for something she did on Roots. She did a great turn in a recent movie called The Invitation, and she's getting a lot of attention right now. And it's no surprise. We were really lucky to get her on the show, and she's been great. In season two, she has a really interesting storyline as well. And yeah, she actually finds herself in the middle of a little bit of a surprising triangle between, uh, Pernell Harris, played by Ron Perlman, and KD, played by Garrett Dillahunt.
Hmm. Well, that'll be interesting. I was going to say we're going to go to break in a second, but I there was a scene between her and Dana Delaney in a bar, where the confrontational scene, and I wanted to take a cold shower after seeing them together. I mean, just wow. I mean,
Yeah.
and,
I had that
jeez.
scene. I had that scene in my mind from the moment I decided that he would have a call girl, and I didn't want it to just be the typical, here's the sex pot, and here's the wife who's sort of frigid. No, Dana Delaney's hot as well, and Dana Delaney is powerful, and this is not just sort of this, call girl, pay by the hour call girl. These are two really powerful women.
Oh yeah.
So I always intended to have a scene that would, for me, would be the equivalent of, De Niro and Pacino in Heat, where they are rivals and they sit face to face and have this conversation that seems very amicable. They don't raise their voices, and yet there's so much going on there. And I have to say, those two ladies just knocked it out of the park. One of my favorite scenes of the season.
That was great. It was great. All right, listen. Let's take a quick break here for a word from our sponsor.
Sounds good.
Hi, this is Rich Scheidner. And if you've ever wondered what it was like to be a stand-up comedian in the 1980s, I'm going to do you a big favor. Instead of billions of dollars for a time machine, you can just spend $24.95 and buy my new book, Kicking Through the Ashes, My Life as a Stand-Up in the 1980s Comedy Boom. It will save you money and give you thrills. It will take you there. Go to my website, richscheidner.com, go to amazon.com, and buy this book.
All right, and we're back. I'm talking to Ben Watkins. Ben, I was also wondering. Now, you said that Amazon did not ask you to change the name of the show, and they're pretty well known for letting a lot of things fly that clearly wouldn't happen at a network, and more like an HBO or Showtime level of acceptance of stuff. But was there anything in the original script that they did draw the line at? Was there anything you did have to cut back on?
No. No, not at all. I mean, there were some things that we pitched them during season one where they said, I think that's taken a little too far. But most of the time, if you made a strong case for it, and in a show where somebody goes crazy, it's hard to say that this behavior wouldn't happen, right? That was one of the little Trojan horse things that I did, was create a show with a character who could do anything and you could still justify it because he's gone crazy. So if you made a good case, Amazon was willing to hear it out. And for the pilot, one of the great things about this show, and it's in Hollywood, when you're developing a show, a lot of times you come up with a good idea and then you take that out and you sell the idea and then you get paid to write the script. And so at that point, a lot of different people are influencing what's going to happen with the show. It's going to be, even as they bought your idea, but they're asking for certain things as you develop the outline and then the script. In this case, I had a script, so they knew what they were getting. And we already had a director in Mark Forster. We already had Ron Perlman attached. So they got a chance to read the script and decide, is this the show we want to make? And when they decided that's what they wanted to do, they didn't ask for any major changes on that script.
Now there is a considerable, not an over-the-top amount, but there is a considerable amount of nudity in the series. Ron Perlman, we see his bare butt. Dana Delaney, I don't think had any real exposure of nudity, although she looks.
She did in one episode. She.
Now we got to go back. No.
Yeah, you go back. I think it's actually in the 8th episode. We find her in bed with another guy, and when she gets up, she's nude.
I missed that. I don't know how I missed that, but I did. Well, and what I was going to say is, I guess it's the kind of thing where, if going in, Ron Perlman and in this case Dana Delaney have acknowledged that they're going to do some nudity, it's really hard for anybody down the call sheet to say no to it, isn't it?
It is, but it's such a personal thing. Even people who have agreed to do it, and a lot of the actors and actresses, in theory, say, "Yeah, I'm fine with that. If the scene calls for it, I'd be willing to do it." But then, as the day approaches, it really is a hard decision, even for some people who should have no problem, you know. And so, Ron Perlman. I'll give you a couple examples. Ron Perlman takes this role. And one of the things I knew going in when I wrote the script, I said, I want to make sure whoever plays this lead character knows that they're going to be put into a very uncomfortable situation. And so the first scene that they will film will be them naked in the middle of a fountain. And Ron Perlman signed on to that. So, and we had that discussion. If you want to do this role, if you're into this role, that part's going to be in there. And I actually had no idea that Ron Perlman would be interested. When he came on board, I wondered, would he push back on that? And as anyone would, he said, "Hey, I don't know about this." He joked around about how, you might lose viewers if you show me naked. Cause he's this guy who's been everyone's hero, and he's still everyone's hero, but he's so self-deprecating. And so he joked about that, but I said, no, we definitely need to do it. And it's really a quintessential way to introduce this character and set the tone. And he said, all right, I'll do it. And then we had, a number of the actresses that end up, nude on the show. They don't make that decision lightly. So they really want to be able to have it rooted in the character and rooted in the story. And, we really value them being willing to be that vulnerable. I mean, there's nothing like that to be, not only are you, undressing in front of all the people who are filming it, but now it's going to be, marked in history. Like anyone can pull it up right now and watch you.
Right.
So, you've made a major decision in your career and in your life, and we value that. So we talk to them about what they're comfortable with, how far they're willing to take it. And, everyone got on board and really, agreed to do it when it was called for. And I have to say, as you mentioned, I mean, when Ron Perlman and Dana Delaney, who've been in the business for decades, and they're saying, hey, the story calls for it and I'm willing to do it. That's a lot of courage no matter what. Even though they're both so great looking, it still takes a lot of courage, and it really does set a tone.
Yeah, it's not like an episode of The Red Shoes where, it's superfluous, where, we're going to have a couple of young starlets run topless through the background so that we can up our rating. There was no superfluous nudity or sex in the series. It all moved things along. It was good that way. All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to run out of time. I got a couple more quick things I want to ask you about. This is probably the most important question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you got your thinking cap on? You ready for this?
All right. Here we go.
All right. Which TV trio is more fun on a set? Is it Burn Notice's Jeffrey Donovan, Gabriel Anwar, and Bruce Campbell, or is it Hand of God's Ron Perlman, Dana Delaney, and Andre Royo?
Wow, that is a tough one. I mean, that's like the death match of TV trios. I mean, just because it's more recent and there's a certain chemistry that's on Hand of God, and also because it's surprising. I would have to say it would be Perlman, Delaney, and Royo. And I would add to that the Garrett Dillahunt factor. People don't realize how hysterical Garrett Dillahunt is. He's sort of like that, undercover comedian, and he drops these one-liners at the most random of moments, and it just brings the house down. So if we just add that last factor to it, it has to go the Hand of God trio.
That must be pretty good then, because you just knocked a trio with Bruce Campbell out of the box. So
I don't. Well, Bruce Campbell is a force of nature on his own. So it is almost unfair you asking that question, because you could put him up against most trios in the business just by himself, and he would win.
Well, we could talk for a whole hour about just Burn Notice, but I'm not going to do that to you today. Well, we may just have to have you come back again and do that. So you've got one season done. You've recorded. You've taped the second season now. That's starting. But where do you go with the Hand of God in season 2? I mean, I kind of feel like I got completion at the end of season 1. So is it the same title with a different cast? Is it the same cast? Is there a new? I mean, can you give us a little hint of season 2?
Well, there's a huge question coming out of season 1. We really, the season starts with this Pernell Harris's son in a coma, and we go through the entire season one. We get to the end, and you're still not sure did he live or die. All you know is they pull the plug on his life support system, and then we leave it open ended as to whether or not he lives or dies, and that sort of becomes the kickoff for season two. We've been throwing around these words restitution and rebirth for season two, mostly because so much happens in season one. There's a lot of fallout. There are a lot of consequences that have to be dealt with. And so we spend time and we really focus on Ron Perlman and Dana Delaney. Their characters really have been, just disassembled over the course of season one. And I wanted to see, what does it look like when they put themselves back together? There's no way they can put themselves back together the same. It's like you broke a vase. There's going to be cracks. There's going to be gaps. What will it look like? How will they hold up? And so we get to see that. And then in season two, we start to answer a lot of the questions. We set up some mysteries in season one. There's a groundbreaking software out there that's missing. And the theft of that software kind of triggered a lot of these tragic events. There's a political force going on in season one. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. There's a new major player that comes into town in the form of Brooks Innovations, which is sort of like a Steve Jobs or Apple or Google type of company. And they finally set root at the end of season one, and we'll get to see what does that look like, how does that change the landscape of San Vicente. And then there's the fallout. There are a lot of people that get hurt or killed in season one, and someone's going to have to be held accountable in one way or another. And season two answers that question.
Okay, very good. Well, folks, listen, you can find Ben Watkins' provocative and, as I said, brilliant TV series Hand of God, now in its second season, only on Amazon Prime. If you don't have Amazon Prime, just you can click on one of the links below this interview on MrMedia.com, and you can join today. For a flat rate, you get access to these TV shows such as Hand of God and Mozart in the Jungle, movies. The annual membership also includes free shipping, which I'm sure the TV people and the producers are like, oh God, do you have to mention that in the same thing? But it's part of the draw, you get the free shipping, and it's a great deal. We've had it for years. I'm sure there's a website for Hand of God. What about for you? Can people find you through social media?
Yeah, they can find me in social media at Benipedia. That's Benipedia. I got that name from my kids because I act like I know everything. I'm on Twitter and on Instagram as Benipedia.
Excellent. Well, yeah. Ben Watkins, I really appreciate that. I found a reason that I had to sit down and watch the entire series, and it was a bonus to find out your involvement with Burn Notice, which I'm also a big fan of. Thank you so much for joining us on Mr. Media today. I'm so glad to join the ranks of all the people you've interviewed. Thank you for taking the time. It was a pleasure. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience full of true believers whose lives are also filled with sex, lies, brutal violence, hypocrisy, and old books with the centers carved out to hide thumb drives in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida.